Hi, so this month's challenge is focused around light and taking better photos in light. So my challenge to you is to submit one or two of your best shots. So let's walk through a few tips and tricks, and I'll show you some examples of how we can use light. So here's a shot specifically that I'd taken that I'd set up before the sun rose. The sun's just behind the clouds right now, and as you can kind of see, the scene itself doesn't really stand out. Everything's fairly evenly lit. Looks okay, but not really spectacular. Here again, though, is just a few minutes later when the sun rose above those clouds, and it creates a really nice effect. All of a sudden, things are lit differently. You get the shadows, and you can really see that texture in the foreground. You get the light coming across the water as well. It creates more colors in contrast within the image, and it just makes it more vibrant and pop. Now here's an example of another photo that I took in Canyonlands National Park. This time I'm waiting for sunset, and what that did was, by having that sun lower, it created these shadows that are cast across these different mountain ranges, and that really helped to create a lot of depth. And you can see the closer mountains here in the foreground. You get a mid-ground set of mountains, and then your further background mountains. And that creates that depth and separation and adds a lot of mood as well to the shot. Similarly, think about how you can use light to draw in the focal point of your scene. In this one, you can see I use the light in the background to highlight these different mushrooms and these little sprouts that are coming up around it, and that really kind of pulls your eye right into that scene. Likewise, here's an example with the projector in which that light kind of draws you down into the main focal point, which is the projector in this scene. And it's just kind of a great way to create this focal point that just draws you in. I'm using the light to really kind of draw this focus. It diffuses around our subject here, and it creates this halo and really brings her into the primary focus. Another interesting thing to be aware of is light bounces off of surfaces, and you can kind of get that here. As you can see, the blue background, the light hitting it and reflecting back on her has kind of highlighted her blue on the backside. Light also has a really great effect in portraits. One of the things that a lot of times makes them pop that you might not have noticed right away is called hair glow. And you can see that example here with my daughter's photo, where around the back of her head it kind of halos with that sun in the background. Here's another example with my son sitting on a tree, and he's got this really great hair glow. It kind of pops and creates that focal point around him. One other point is to create this effect, you don't just have to do this outside, you can also do this inside. Think about your lighting inside, and a lot of times when you're taking photos inside, you'll notice they're very flat, and that's because you have all your lights on. You have direct overhead light. Turn off the lights in the room and try to control the light source. Use light coming through a window, or turn on one light that you have maybe that's lower to the side, do it behind them. Control your light sources, and you'll find that it adds a lot more drama and effect to your photos and makes them just stand out even more. You don't always have to remove the sun or have it off to the side in your photos. It can also create a lot of really great effect. You can get the sun rays, in this case, coming across in this photo, again in Canyonlands, and it adds a lot of depth. You get some of the shadows coming off of those vertical cliffs, and it creates a lot of depth. You can also see in the foreground where it's highlighting in different spaces, and it creates a lot of different color variations between light and dark areas, and again helps with depth and gives some of that scale. Likewise, this next photo is zoomed in that space, and it's used to create this really strong contrast. You've got everything now silhouetted with the sun in the background. Think about ways that you can use color as well in your photos. And this is a really great example of complementary colors, where you've got a lot of times when you get a sunrise or a sunset, you'll have very yellow, orange, or pink kind of colors. And think about ways of contrast. The way in this photo that it silhouettes really nice is you get the black to the yellow, which go really well together. Here's another shot that it was taken in California, and again you get these really great kind of color contrasts where you get these different pastel-like shades of yellow to the getting darker and darker with the islands and the and then closer to us in the foreground where it gets almost completely black. And the colors themselves just work really strongly together. So think about how you can use colors in your photo to really kind of highlight that light. Don't forget to have fun with light. Light interacts with different things differently. In this case, this was this photo I captured in Central Park where somebody's blowing these giant bubbles, and it was just really neat to see how that played off of the bubbles. It highlighted around the edges, but also cast different colors, almost a rainbow across the surface of that water. So think about fun ways and different things that you can use to really highlight a scene with light. Similarly, this was taken in Utah in one of the slot canyons, and the sun just happened to be kind of coming through that little arch or entryway there into that next section, and it just added something more to the scene. So be aware of how light plays in different areas that you're in and take advantage of it to really just make that scene even more. So not to be overlooked, but the opposite of light is dark. So nighttime photography can also be a really great way to make light a main focus. And so you can see here in this case, this photo of the snowman is a really great way to really make it pop and stand out and vibrant, because it is a light object in a overly dark scene. Similarly, another shot that was taken was this one from the light show, where we have this hot air balloon creating fire that's jutting out. And again, it just creates this really great contrast with this background being very dark to this very vibrant fire that is shooting up. Here's a scene taken in New York. Another fun way to play with light at dark is to do a longer exposure, which creates these trails of light from the different cars and can add a lot to the effect. Similarly, here's another shot taken with the Milky Way and using a silhouette and flashlight to kind of highlight this arch and just really draw your eye in and just create this really kind of great effect. I've been showing you a lot of how you can use this with portraits and landscape, but don't also underestimate how these same principles work for all things. Here's a photo of a bird sitting on a snowbank, and again, having that cross light with the shadows creates a little depth on the snow it's standing on, but also you get the shadow across just the edge of the bird. You can very much tell the direction of the light, and that creates that contrast. Similarly, here's another bird, a parrot in this case, and again, those shadows and having that light direction, you can see it on the branches, and it also kind of darkens up like a gradient across the bird because you got that soft light diffusing across it. It adds a little more contrast to the shot. Here's a crane, and you can see how that light is coming through the side, and it creates, again, a little more depth and just changes up the scene a little more. Here's one of some pigs that we own, and kind of using the light in kind of a similar to the portrait photography of thinking about how having the light behind them creates this hair glow around, and it just adds a little more to that photo and makes it even more interesting. So now I've given you all this wonderful advice about how to use light, and I've shown some very dramatic examples of how to use light. And now I'm going to tell you, for every rule that I was given, that there's times where you want to think differently about it. Here's an example from the Badlands that doesn't have direct light. There isn't a specific space in this scene that is really highlighted by the light. In fact, it was very overcast that day, and it just created this kind of almost soft lighting evenly across the scene. But in this scene, it just works for me because it creates and really highlights just this texture and all these lines across there. It almost to me looks like this photo isn't a photo, but was actually painted. It just has these brush strokes. So don't be afraid to break the rules and think about cases where having just a soft light and not having an area of focus can really work. So I hope this helped. This, of course, is my first video, so please give me comments. Let me know what I can do better. Do you want it shorter? Do you want it longer, more in depth? Give me feedback, and I'll iterate as I go along and keep making these videos for y'all. Thanks.